There was a point where I wanted to quit, and your ecosystem said,
No, certain learning disabilities you had and how you overcame.
Hi, I'm Samana Tejani. I am Operations Director at Kids Food Product. We are a third generation family business, and I like talking to people about my experiences, and that's why we're here today.
Hi, I'm Aparna Gupta, founder and editor-in-chief at Lavender Room, your go-to space for all things beauty and wellness. I'm also a content creator and I specialize in fragrances, and I'm a brand consultant. I help brands grow. Welcome to the first edition of Lavender Room, Inside Out, a conversation with insiders. And I'm so happy to have you. As much as I admire you for your professional competence, I really admire you for your personal compassion.
I think it was meant to be. There's an energy that we share. It came together. That we converse brings out maybe the best in us.
Absolutely. So the idea of recording this was if more people were privy to the amazing conversations we have and the light moments that we have. What if it could probably entertain some and inspire many?
I couldn't agree more. And I think that because people know you only a certain way, I think that this will hopefully give them insight to the Aparna behind the scenes.
So today's conversation is all about leadership, rituals, well-being, and the lives we build. So of course, when we talk about Lavender Room, beauty is a part of it, but I don't believe that beauty can exist in isolation. Beauty is a very holistic part of who we are.
I think maybe you could do without the rest of the beauty, but the inside part will immediately show up.
Absolutely. So Samana, what is the first thing that you think of when you think of work? I'm asking you because you are a third generation entrepreneur. I want to know that if someone was born with a silver spoon, what motivates you to work? When people are talking about work-life balance, people are talking about taking breaks.
I think the people that we affect, the employees, but being a food company, we also make a significant difference in other people's lives. We're a family business, we're involved in the community. We have a female workforce. Sometimes you hear stories that are very inspiring, and sometimes you hear stories from them that are heart-wrenching. But the commonality that I saw is they all get up and show up to work. Whether the story is inspiring or heart-wrenching, get up and they show up.
We all know about GITS as food which is associated with our childhood memories. How would you describe what is the company according to you? What does it do?
We create moments, I think, through food. That's our core competency. If I talk about it from our consumers' point of view, we really get stories that I'm always amazed to read, and I like to do it. And we as a family, all of us read the things that are sent in. Once we got an email that said, "Thank you for doing what you do. I'm so grateful," because she had hosted her first Raksha Bandhan at her house, and this lady had made GITS gulab jamuns. And she said that, you were a big part of what I did, and because I want you to be part of this, she sent us a Rakhi.
Wow.
And I was like, how, for a company that has that kind of goodwill, the legacy is already built around that. So our job is to ensure that the legacy continues in the way that it was built to do that. So I think we build moments around food.
Was it always the intention also? Was it the intention with which the company was started?
So I think the company was started with the intention of building a business ethically.
Okay.
That was the founding idea from my grandfather. And maybe here's a good point to touch on it. The company was founded by my Nana and Dada, so my maternal and paternal grandfathers. And
when they were not related to each other?
They were not related to each other. My Nana was the founding editor of Vyapar, the Gujarati newspaper. It was the first economic newspaper in India, regional one. And he was the founding editor for that. And my Dada used to bring him advertisements for the paper. My Dada was able to sell a Boltman comb, right? So he had the gift of the gap. He was a true salesman. He would go to the market every day. He would go hang out at like MD Road, and he would go to the food stores, and if somebody didn't have stock, the local guy would get a call from him and say, "Why doesn't he have stock? Have you delivered it? What's going on?" So
after a point when he built his business, what motivated him?
I think he was incredibly proud of what we had built. And I say we because I think he instilled that language in us very early on, that it was everyone that built it. So because of his personality, my Nana said, if you ever decide to start a business, I'd really like to invest.
Okay.
And my dada told him that there is this technology for dried foods from CFTRI, and I think that we should try that. And he said, okay.
And how
they
many
started.
years back in time are we talking about?
1963, this conversation has happened. And they went to CFTRI, they brought everything. And the first thing that we launched was soups. And it was so early for its time. So they thought it was soap. They could not even understand that soup was a thing. Like, that's how early we were. And then eventually we got into pickles, and then the gulab jamun was born, and everything happened. Then the second generation happened because my mom and dad fell in love and they got married. And actually both grandfathers said, this is a very bad idea. There is a business involved. You all should not be getting married. So the second generation was my mom, my dad, and my uncle.
So your mom was equally a part of the system.
So in the 90s, I think once I became about 10, 12 years old, she joined the business again. The glue that binds all of us together. And now the third generation is me, my cousin brother, so my mama's son, and my sister.
You have a legacy which is built, right? You have a technology which is much ahead of its time. What do you feel is your responsibility?
The thing started with, we built a company founded on ethics. We will sell, like the quality policy of the company is, we will not sell what we don't relish ourselves. And if you see it in Hindi, when my father was doing it the first time, he said, हम बेचेंगे नहीं जो हम खाएंगे नहीं. And that is the trust with which even the workers and everybody else was explained. So if things are not good, quality is not okay, we're not even going to engage. Like, we have a zero tolerance policy.
There is always said you have to cut corners in business.
So I don't think so. Nobody is saying cost saving is not an objective that we run with. Of course it is, and it should be, right? It's a for-profit center, but how you do it matters. I don't want to compromise on the kind of kajus I'm using, but is there a way that maybe a form of cardboard that's not as expensive, that will not in any way hamper the quality of the product, but will make us a little bit more competitive, because we have to be competitive to be able to sell.
What are the things that you don't compromise on as a company, and what are the things you don't compromise on as a person? Are they same?
I think they're very similar, because I think we've kind of been brought up with that, right? But I think as a company, we will not compromise on the quality of the actual product we're selling. If I had to tell you about my grandfather, he would ask our head of finance a few questions. One of them weekly would be, have you paid the workers on time?
You know, this is so interesting, Samana, because there was someone who told me that कि गरीब का पैसा सूखने से पहले उसका payment हो जाना चाहिए.
You have no right to delay anyone's payment. Right?
Sometimes you don't have it. That's why you delay it, right? Everyone lives in the credit cycle.
Yeah, I know that maybe some of our vendors will ask for more time, that listen, it's not happened yet. We understand, we're sorry. And on the business side, you can have a relationship with your vendor to ask that question if you are trapped for cash. But doing it to your employees or your workers, they come to work for you, and your primary responsibility is to pay those guys on time. As a company, salaries not being paid on time is a complete
red flag.
Like, it is not going to happen. And if it happens, like, the whole family will kind of get involved in that situation. Like my father, if he's walking around the office and there's a truck driver waiting to be paid, he will first go and ask the accounts guy, how long has he been sitting here? Why have you not cleared his payment? But I think our responsibility to the larger audience also, our workers is one, our quality, the products that we manufacture is another, our involvement in communities, in understanding what we can do to extend ourselves within that purview, are all things that kind of made the company who we are.
What is your value? So
My
you said
value.
that as a company, you would not compromise with the values of payments to your workforce. So as a person, what are the values which are very important to Samana?
For me, it would be not cheating anyone, not wishing ill of anybody, treating others with respect. But I think that you have to make an effort to do it. It's not good enough to say, I want to do it, but my personality doesn't allow for it. I think you have to make an effort to do those things. Nobody is your punching bag, not your peers, not your family. I think that respecting the person in front of you, whoever that may be, is the basic trait that you have to have. Now, with that said, please don't think that I'm some saint and I don't get angry and things like that. Of course, I get angry. And of course, there are moments where I also lose it. But I'm very aware of the fact that what I did yesterday was not okay, or what I've said to this person needs some rectification.
How do you maintain the balance? Strong boundaries and still not be a pushover?
I mean, I don't think I have a perfect answer to that. It's very much work in progress. We have an advisor who once told me that, I think you don't say anything because you want to avoid conflict. There will come a time where you get sick of it. At that point, you will start expressing your opinion, and the rest of the room won't be ready for it, because we're conflict avoiders. and you have to realize where, look, not all battles have to be won. At the same time, not all battles have to be lost. I am now training myself to say, no, I'm going to argue this point until I am either convinced that it's okay to let it go, or I have convinced the other person.
Sometimes often we trade peace. We talk a lot about self-love. Self-love is the basis of feeling beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? And most of us maybe have a lot of issues with it. But it also comes to the point of self-respect. That where do you draw the line? I mean, everyone talks about, you should say no. But at the same time, you don't want to be inflexible.
Yeah. I started kind of giving it some thought. Is it important that this goes through and I'm letting it go because I want to avoid conflict? Or is it stubbornness that I'm holding on to this? The thing here is to remember that most times we can go back to the conversation. For example, I've agreed to a decision that I'm not actually very comfortable with. And I used to always think that that particular conversation is the end of that ordeal. In that conversation, I have the option to say, let's park this for now and we'll come back to it tomorrow. So I have enough time to think about it. It's okay for me to say, no, I disagree with this decision and these are my reasons for it. And it's okay to say, fine, I'm letting this go, but please know I'm not very comfortable with what I've done right now. And I think that that's an important piece, especially for people like us who avoid conflict, like you said.
You're almost rewiring your brain to be comfortable.
Being a pushover isn't the answer.
Yeah.
And if you have good people around you, they'll kind of watch that.
How did you have such a strong inner compass? Was it something that you inherited or was it something that was built?
The foundation was definitely laid by my family. My mother has a very, very large part to play in this, in doing what is right. So when we first started working, all three of us on our first paychecks were told, take out 10% of your salaries and use it for good. She said, I hate the word donation, but use it towards something. We also saw her live that very prominently in terms of how she would look after people around her. Whether it was domestic help, whether it was, other charities that maybe approached us. She was very centered around doing good. You have to do good to get good. And I think my father's support for that was also very, very high. He also believed in those things, so he also wanted to do better. So did our grandfather. My Nana was so known for his ethics. There was some case against us in the 60s. And I think one of the judges saw him enter and said, why are you in the courthouse? And we better get this case dismissed. And he walked with him because he could not understand how anybody could have thought that he would do something unethical. All of them taught us that. When I was in Pune around 2015 or so, I wanted to start an education project. The actual thought I had was, if you have 600 women that work for you and if each of them has 2 children, I should at least be able to ensure that these 1200 kids go to school. So the idea started with, let's build a school. Except when I came to know how complex it is to build a school, I was like, yeah, this is not happening. At least not now. I think if I had to tell you, that is probably my final goal for GITS, is that we have a school that's either free of cost or very minimal, very subsidized, where everyone that's associated with us gets to go to school for free and really create top-notch education. That would be my life's mission at the end, is that. But in the meantime, I wanted to do something. So an advisor told me about starting a project where we could help underprivileged schools with basic things. I was very clear, but infrastructure is not something that people want to invest in. Teacher trainings are not something that is often sponsored, and nutrition, given what we do at GITS. So we started this project, and I remember my dad saying, you have no budget. Do whatever you need to do. But I remember talking to my uncle as well and saying, no, Papa said this. And he said, he's absolutely right. Whatever you need is yours. Because you're running this project, and what better place for us to deploy funds? So do not worry. Your budget is unlimited.
Okay.
You do whatever you want. And I wanted to check with my uncle because I'm like, that's a big statement to make. Yeah? And he said, no, of course, do the same thing.
Wow.
And then the other big thing that we're very proud of is in about 2010, we had a big surge in vegetable prices in India. And my father one day came to all of us that worked on the floor and all and said, we are finding vegetables so expensive. What's happening to the workers? We said, we'll find out. And we did. And it came to notice that a lot of them were not eating lunch anymore. They were taking naps essentially during that time. And it had become a real problem. Now, the part of the story I didn't know was he had also discussed it with my uncle. And he said, whatever you want to do, I want you to start distributing vegetables every day to the workers. Until one day he walked into the room where we were all seated and he said, this is going to start from tomorrow. Enough with you guys trying to figure it out.
How old were you that time?
I was 24 maybe at the time, and I was fully involved in the business. So my head of operations was there, our CEO at the time was with us, and we said okay, so we brought the vegetables in and we decided that it should be enough for a family of 4 and it should last about 2 or 3 days. So we started distributing the vegetables. The program has now grown to 2 fresh vegetables every day for the workforce. Then we did some more research on, where's the money going. And because we live in Maharashtra, it was a big expense that was there. Jaggery was the other, and oil is the third. We incorporated that within it. So now the program's been running since that 2010 till now. And everybody that comes to work that day, you're entitled to the 2 fresh vegetables that we are giving. And this is not part of their salary. This is part of what the company does. It comes from our profit. But it was because we started that, and we have all women that work for us. So kids getting nutrition, their own blood count started going up because there was always access to food. And I think the beauty is that all of us as a family, so when I say family, it means second generation, third generation, we're very proud of that program and we want to continue it. My favorite time of the day is to watch that kind of happen and 2 other workmen distribute and do everything.
Did you have problems or did you have any challenges receiving?
No, I actually don't think I struggled with that. But when I think of receivers, for me, I will think of people giving me advice or feedback. I'm okay to receive negative feedback. I'm okay to receive positive feedback. I'll internalize it. I'll look at it.
So now you're talking about from a place of privilege, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, if let's say someone doesn't come from a place of privilege, what would be your advice to them?
Finding your tribe that you can, finding mentors. I think that's probably something that I've learned along the way, is that you beat down with a stick till you find a mentor. One that can serve you in life in terms of, maybe you have different mentors for different things, but I think that mentorship plays such an important role. Today, with the world that we live in, your access to mentors is also much easier. And people in privilege want to mentor people. I think that's a big thing that you can kind of reach out to. Find your inner sanctum. Find the people that you can reach out to without judgment. And ensure that they're also, surround yourself with people better than you is also important. While saying that, I also don't want to put so much pressure on yourself or anything. It's a good way to live life in that sense. But I think that we've done a lot of discussing about me. So tell us a little bit about your journey. You started off in a publication house.
It was lifestyle.
Lifestyle.
It was entertainment. It was attending concerts, interviewing a lot of celebrities, attending parties. I was not enjoying it so much. And I always wanted a niche, an area of specialization. I was very young, 19, 20. It's quite by chance because I actually wanted to do economic honors. I did not take up maths in my 11th and 12th, and at that time there was nobody to tell me that, listen, if you can't take up maths, you can't do eco honors. And then at that time I did English honors, and I realized that I was always inclined to liberal arts. I liked storytelling. One of my college professors, or women in journalism, you needed to have aggressive sort of persona or very, very opinionated sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Some of my most viral stories or some of my most trending stories may not be the most brilliant pieces of writing. I mean, I was also very young. I experienced things. I realized that I like speaking to founders. I like speaking about what motivated people to do what they do. Because every day you're meeting someone who is the spokesperson of some company. Not a spokesperson, they are either actors, they're either directors or something. So overall, I must have interviewed more than 1,000 or maybe 2,000 people across all walks of life.
What an incredible thing.
One day you're meeting a founder of a brand, which is of a jewelry brand. The other day you're meeting an actor, then you're meeting a director, then you're meeting an artist, then you're meeting someone who is an investment banker.
Wow. Entertainment writing, you then focused into beauty and luxury.
Yes, because I moved to luxury. Its roots in India. You have watches and jewelry, you have spirits, which you really can't talk about, and you have beauty. And within beauty, you have color cosmetics, you have skincare, you have fragrances, you have hair care. And at that time, it was not very prominent, but different ways of living. And I think because I did specialize in beauty when I was with Times of India for almost like 5 to 6 years, and to talk about beauty every month on month. In fact, I thought that, oh my God, I had no precedent. Like otherwise it was beauty is a few pages in a magazine.
Yeah.
I, of course, did a lot of research and you learn on the job and everything, but it's something that I started to enjoy. I'm now not just a journalist. I've done so many different things in my life, and I would say I'm more of a consultant in that capacity. But as a journalist, I think what you should never stop doing is being curious.
Yeah. Because
That
I think you're
curiosity.
curious for the rest of us, right?
Now that you're saying it, it makes sense.
Found your little niche, you started working, and then you found fragrances as your super specialty, as you call it, right?
Yes, as my super niche. I like fragrances the best because firstly, they're very artistic. Not all fragrances. The core of a fine fragrance is not judgmental. It is only there to make your life better. I feel that I could have been, if not an economist, I really feel I could have been artist also. Or I have a tendency towards art, so I obviously steered more towards fragrances.
Wow, that's quite amazing. Whenever I think, if I had to think of fragrances in my head, I have two things that come to mind. One is you,
Okay.
and the other is Emily in Paris.
Oh wow.
But let's go back to you as what your this incredible career in publishing. Tell us a little bit about your mindset when you were making the shift. What prompted you to do it? Why did you go into it? And what was mentally, what did you have to get ready for to do that?
I think mentally I had to get ready for the fact that I will not have a paycheck at the end of the month. The shift happened. Tried to change my mindset from what if to what else. And also I wanted more freedom in terms of expression at that particular time. But you are someone, your words are the weightage because it is published by something.
Yeah.
So your words are important because they are
By
published
publication.
by something. So can I create something like that of my own? Can I create a platform where the words or opinion or that story will be valuable for the story? I was very scared.
Tell us a little bit about Lavender Room and about the difference between Aparna Writes Beauty and Lavender Room as well.
Okay, so I think Aparna Writes Beauty is my POV where I share certain tips, tricks, or product recommendations which I feel should empower the other person. So, you know, there are so many choices. So, and beauty is something which traditionally is used to make you feel insecure. So, again, the whole thing of Aparna Writes Beauty started with a very childish notion that what if it could make you feel secure, and how Lavender Room is different from Aparna Writes Beauty. Lavender Room is a consolidation of a lot of POVs. It is usually also a place where you get expert-led guidance to have different people talk about what they are passionate about. I think Lavender Room is a space for all of that. My belief was also to build brands. You can't just build something by digital only. You have to create online, offline experiences also. So the idea was also how to create offline experiences that are a win-win situation for everyone, which is for the brand, the creator, and me also.
So if I had to look at it, I'd say you're building your legacy now. I mean, of course, it has a purpose and it has everything, but I think that's what you're essentially doing.
I hope when people think of beauty and when they want to know whether a product is good, not good, they look at Lavender Room as a resource.
There you go.
My idea is very strongly to build.
That's probably the uniqueness that I've seen about you, right? That you're always talking about building.
I would always support people at different stages of building. I would say that have to do this.
Yeah.
Or you're not ready for it. There are some brands which are not ready for PR. There are some brands which are not ready for events. Some brands which are not ready for sampling. My idea is to empower and build.
So if I look at it now, I think I've identified at least 3 personas of you already.
Okay.
There's the editor,
Yes.
there's the consultant, and then the Lavender Room where you're a boss lady and you're hustling and you're doing that part. There's the creator side, and from what I know of you personally, there's also just the you side, right? There's the mother, the daughter, the wife, there's everything intertwined in this. So how is your shift between each of the personas? Like, do you think that there is times where you have to move modes from, say, from editor to consultant, or consultant to mom, or consultant to daughter?
Few years ago, I made that thing that I'm not going to give unsolicited advice if you're not related to me by blood.
Yeah, that is.
Or by a contract. So I'm not going to give that.
Uh-huh.
Because as an editor, you have to pick the flaws
Mm.
and you have to make it cohesive and you have to see what will be engaging and entertaining. As a consultant, you're more protective.
Mm.
Your goal is defined.
Yeah.
One part I think we missed, which
Hmm.
is one of my most favorite parts, is being the curator. It's like bringing people and bringing synergies together. That's the difference between Aparna Writes Beauty and Lavender Room. I used to meet people from different walks of life, and I would just sometimes feel that, what if this person would just know what the other person is doing? Do they know that there's so much of synergy, what magic that they can build if they were to be introduced to each other?
I mean, I get it, right? You might end up at a podcast which you planned and just kind of think about. There is this main character energy, and then there's times where you don't want to be main character,
Yes.
and sometimes when you're mandated to not be main character. And I remember you telling somebody specifically about this, that I understand you're struggling, but you have to switch your mindset to doing what brand has asked of you, as opposed to doing what you want to do in the way that you want to do it, right?
Yeah, I think that's where, as a creator, you have to channel your main character energy. There is no other. I have so many creator friends, and that is what I have learned from them. You have to enter the room thinking that I don't care there are 100 people there. I'm looking fab. I want to take a picture. I want to know about it. That's my literally like the main character energy, right? Whereas if you're the consultant or if you're the curator, you have to take that's a shift of energy where you're creating a scene where someone else can take the spotlight.
And what about the Aparna, the mother, the daughter?
I had my child way too early in life. I don't think she will ever agree that I have been a mother to her. She's always like, okay, I've been pretty much learning on the job. Some of the mothers, they exactly know what to do, how to do it. This is not good. She's my best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think whether she likes it or not, at the moment I'm her best friend too. She said something very nice to me. I mean, I felt it was nice. She's also a teenager. She says a lot of things which are absolutely insulting for most parts of the day. It's like a crumbling, you talk about negotiating with brand founders, and then you come home and then like a 16-year-old is like breaking your ego, like you don't know anything at all. She said something like, I feel very secure. Anyone who walks into my life has very large shoes to fill, because can someone love me like you do? I was quite surprised. I was like,
I think parents tend to give themselves very little credit for things that they do like this, right? And for statements that get made and things that you share.
Being like a parent to 16, it's like building a brand, and it's like every time, every day, the purpose is changing and you're realigning. But yeah, sometimes I started being more mindful about messaging on beauty also, because I knew that my daughter was reading my articles. I don't want to promote a trend that I would not want her to be privy to follow, or else at least not have adequate information about it.
And I think that's the key, right? Having all the information, not just the trending information.
If you're doing this, what is the cost? And also a lot of people say that, okay, you people start on beauty very young and all that sort of thing. But try to look at it from a point of view of child. At one time, you're dolling them up. And then suddenly during their adolescent phase, where they are the most fragile, you tell them, oh, you should not be conscious of your looks. And then at 18, suddenly you want them to walk with a main character energy.
Yeah, that's a very unique way to have broken it down. For me, if you look at me outside, because I've been an operations person all my life, I usually don't wear jewelry. I've never worn a watch. It's not happened. And I think growing up also, there was no focus on looking a certain way. I also think I'm the youngest of 3 that happened. So now it's something that I do because I enjoy it. And the day I'm not feeling good, it's not something that's happening within my thing unless I'm using it to make me feel better. But I think that getting the right information on how to use certain products, how to do certain things, a lot for me now come from content creators.
As a mother, I saw her, she had a full face of makeup on. She also likes experimenting with makeup. And I have seen a lot of artists also, and I know that that's also a form of expression. So I once entered and she had a hole, and I said that, are you going out somewhere? Why do you have
like a full face of
makeup? And she said that I don't do makeup for others, I do it for myself.
Hmm.
And I thought that was powerful. That's
Yeah.
what I was trying to make everyone feel, that one
Yeah.
is corrective makeup, one is expressive just because you like to.
You have this daughter who sounds incredibly confident from whatever you're saying, which is a big ode to you.
You have to meet her. I mean, of course.
How do you sort of set some rituals to recharge yourself to make sure that your energy isn't depleted?
I read energies.
Hmm.
I have done Reiki. I work with crystals also. There are times when I'm very frustrated.
Hmm.
Okay. So that's the time when I would journal. It's
Hmm.
like my negotiation which is happening with the universe, right? So what I do is I have a diary which is divided into two parts. So one is my resentments and my negotiation, that why is this not going right? And the second part of it, like a folded part, is my gratitude. And when I say gratitude, you don't need words so much.
Yeah.
They are just 3-4 images, like
Yeah.
you have to. It's a very conscious ritual that I try to do most of the times in a week, wherein in the end of the day, I actually say that, and this is something which was taught to me by a healer at Atmantan, actually, where they said that you say that wherever I have given my energy, I take it back. Whoever has given me their energy, I give it back. I believe and I go back to the state of being loved, which is by my parents, that unconditional love, and I trust the universe loves me even better than my parents do.
Wow, that's very powerful.
I want to work towards the greatest good of all. If you meet me, I feel that my purpose of the day probably has been done if I'm able to align you to your higher self.
You meet incredible people, and that's been something that you talked about. But the other incredible thing is that your relationships with a lot of them are very active and you can call on almost anyone, right? And I've seen that in your relationships in general, that everybody that comes forward to meet you is really looking forward to spending time with you because they trust you.
I know their energy. It should be something that should align to
With
them.
yeah.
It should be a win-win for them also. Besides work, I'm not great at socializing. If you meet me, I'll just ask you the deep question at first. Like, just tell me, how did you think of me? Get to the
point.
Get to the point. Even when we connected,
Yeah.
Samana, I didn't know. Like, it was like, okay, there is some similarity. Okay, what is it?
Yeah, but you took the trouble to find that out.
My purpose in life is to be a storyteller.
Yeah, but you are, right? And I think that
To tell the stories.
Whatever interaction I've had with you has been storytelling essentially at its greatest, right?
Yeah, because even if it's like an event, I have seen, I have gone for events where you are just not guided, or say you're lost at different points in time. I think I just feel, how can I be the guide?
I have to say this out loud because I think it's an important part, is that your boss lady energy is very real. But I've noticed that you can also swap those energies. So when you're the curator, you're curating, and that's the energy that you're in. And then when you're consulting, you go into boss lady mode, and I think that you're at that stage where you understand what needs to be done, so you expect a certain amount, right? But the one thing I will tell you is I always find you're on the back foot to talk about how good you are, which I understand you don't want to sound like you're tooting your own horn.
Yeah. One of my first job, I was writing. In fact, they had television arm also. They said that, you can speak well and all that. Come in front and do the coverage. I was like, no, I'm shy of the camera, and look where I am.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my earlier editors, he said, mark my words, your future would be in front of the camera. And I'm like, no, I'll be going and I'll be with the photographer and I'll be taking content and I'll tell the stories. And I think till the time I could avoid it, I did.
One of the things that we've discussed actually even within the Family Business Network, right, is why do people shy away from talking about what they're doing? And I think that a part of it is you're supposed to keep your head down and do the work, right? I'm not doing it to get accolades, and I'm not doing it for any other reason. But how am I supposed to know that you're doing it unless you talk about it?
Which is the advice that I give most of my brands and the founders who work with me.
And this was your first step, right?
Bring connections.
Yeah.
What I also do is every 6 months I do a skill upgrade. Okay, like I would learn something that I don't know about. I've not been to an MBA school. I don't know how it works. So I thought, okay, let me take business coaching. Let's see how that works. And there were incredible truths I learned about running the business. But one of the main things which stayed is my coach told me the only thing you have to do, Aparna, is to just get out of your own way. Nobody else is blocking you as much as you yourself are blocking yourself.
But I do think that this is one of those things that women do a lot more than men do. You know, when we do our appraisals or we do anything like that, the girls are always talking about how they need to do better. And the boys are always talking about their accomplishments. As women, we need to sort of very conscientiously tell ourselves that I have to get out of my own way. And what is my role right now? If I'm coming into an appraisal meeting, I need to show what I am good at. I need to show what I can be better at. But I need to do both, right? I don't have to cow down on what I've done. I think that I wish people would start doing it, because a lot of times I feel like the women, they just kind of, shove their accomplishments under the carpet and say, you stay there while I upgrade my skill and I do this and I do that. And I'm not saying that the boys don't do it. Of course they do, and we have very good male leaders as well. But I think that if we had to tell everybody listening today, I think that was one of the things that I hope you take away from here is don't get in your own way. And if you've done something, be extremely proud about it, right?
But what? Okay, now I'll take that thing. How do you know that it is the right time to talk about it?
Well, I think some sensibility will obviously prevail on where do I say it. Going out with my friends, I'm not going to talk about, oh, I did this incredible thing at work, if that's not the energy that's flowing in the room that day. Of course, I want to share my accomplishments with them. But I think a little bit of energy reading is important. Sharing what you did without it becoming the center of the conversation for the whole evening is maybe a yardstick, right? That you did it, you shared it.
Sharing is the key.
I think that we have a lot to share and a lot to give. Your ability to have these conversations, right? I also think, like you said, you're a storyteller. Tell us something that you've taken away from a conversation you've had with somebody.
I meet a lot of achievers. I meet a lot of people who have come to a particular stage where they are the spokesperson for the brand or they are the spokesperson for their life, to be able to say that. But I think overall, all of them have one common thing, and which is the art holding on and letting go. And that is what you do almost
on a daily basis.
But I think what also changed my perspective a lot, you always have a choice. Whether are we in this room because we are destined to be here at this point? Was it fated or is it intentional? I feel that a lot of things in life are intentional.
And I think that
your present choice, how you react to something, determines it's literally like a game. So someone told me, the domino effect.
How you manage your time.
How I manage my time is overall in terms of priority. What is it that I have to do? I find it difficult to do impromptu things, honestly. Like if someone just calls me and says, okay, can we hang for a coffee or something, it probably will be more difficult for me unless and until there is a situation that demands it. But if you say that, okay, let's
meet 3 days from now.
Let's plan it, that can happen. I get up at actually 4:30 and I don't show up in the house till around 8:30.
Oh wow.
So 4 full hours I'm not outside, so that I'm not in the way of anyone, and also at that time I don't want to be accessible. So all my deep thinking work in terms of working on mind mapping documents or even my ideation or anything requires that research.
Your team looks to you for guidance and they expect you to be decisive. And I think that giving direction and there's a difference between giving direction and micromanaging, correct? And I think that often managers struggle between which is which. The difference that happens is, am I leading my team or am I micromanaging my team?
In the friends group or something, you're never taken seriously. It's like, acha theek hai, party ja rahi hai. It's like, okay, like it's your business. You get up anytime you want.
When I joined the business, very often I would get told things like, but you are your own boss. And I'm like, you have no idea the kind of pressure that we feel as legacy owners, because I mean, if it tanks, we are the generation that tanked it. What is it? Your boss is your dad. And I'm like, oh, why don't you just try that once and then we'll see how you feel about it.
I've stopped, I think those things, it used to matter a lot to me till 5 years ago.
And was there something that changed it, or was it just internal?
I think I did a lot of internal work. I started practicing different forms of meditation. I think slowly the noises didn't bother me. It's like, okay, it doesn't.
Tell me something, were you always an early riser?
No. But I think it started by your trying to manage your time. I'll be fair and I'll be honest. I was getting less of sleep. Overall, it was just the awareness that if I get up early, I'm able to do a lot more of what I want to do.
Yeah.
So if I get up early, I can go for a walk. If I get up early, I can probably spend 30 minutes more with my plants. It's as bizarre as that,
But I think that it's important that we discuss that we're both using the word manage and not balance of time.
I grew up with the fantasy that, it will be 50-50%. I can work, or, things like, if you love what you do, you will not have to work. Different theories about it. I strive for the balance. It's like a bahikata of good and bad.
Yeah. The term that gets thrown around is work-life balance, and I was telling you that I'd asked Anuaga once about how do you work-life balance, and she had told me that every time somebody says this, I think of a girl walking on a tightrope, right? And she's either going to fall this way or fall that way. And instead of that, I think that the right word is manage. How do you manage your time to do everything? And I swear it was like a light bulb went off in my head, because I'm also visual. That she's walking on a tightrope versus now she's managing, it just broke that whole thing down for me.
If I have to spend time with my daughter, if she wants to go for a grocery run, I'll be like, okay. The idea is, let's do that. It doesn't have to be all the time extremely
productive.
Grand. I think before ChatGPT was there, I was the human ChatGPT. My husband said that, ChatGPT said the exact thing what you were telling me. And I said that, I'm your paid version for free.
Yeah, there you go, right? The part to get there is after a lot of hustle, right? We have the privilege of being able to do the things that we can do now because we've finished the hustle that we've done before. And obviously...
And the hustle continues in different ways.
In
fact, you were telling me that one of the sessions, you actually were diagnosed with a learning disability.
Yeah. So actually that's an interesting thing that you bring up. I struggled in school quite a bit, and I struggled with writing. I didn't struggle with understanding or oral work or anything like that. And when I say writing, I had no classical symptoms of a learning disability. I didn't have bad handwriting. I didn't write mirror images. None of that stuff. I just could not produce the answers on paper. So anyway, long story short, my father coincidentally met somebody who runs the Dyslexia Association of India on a flight. I was like, this sounds an awful lot like my childhood. So I explained what used to happen, and he said, you have learning disability. I mean, I don't think anyone ever told you that. Mind you, now I've graduated, I've started working. There's no relation for me.
This is when you had access to best of education.
Exactly. Right? I went to an IB school. I went abroad to study everything. Even in Purdue, one of my teachers had noticed that something was wrong, and he asked me to go and get some help. But that time, I think it was a misdiagnosis of ADD. Plus, I was in my last year, so I was also like, now what is the point? So we went to this guy, and I told him what was happening, and said that you definitely have one. And he asked me to write out a sentence which had some very complex spellings, is all I remember about it. And when I finished writing, he looked at me and he said, yeah, you definitely have an LD. He's like, from the way that you've written, I must have been 24, 25 at the time, and my writing age was 14. And I was like, okay. And he said, did you have struggle with your motor skills? Like, were you able to play properly? And I just couldn't, right? I loved tennis, but I couldn't. But I was a good student in the sense that I understood and I liked being in school. He said, I will.
But wasn't that a time where you felt shattered?
Not at all. In fact, I think I felt very hopeful.
Really?
But it's funny that you asked me that, because that was the question he asked me next. He was like, listen, I will diagnose you officially on the condition that you don't go into a black box. And this was my exact answer to him. I was like, I'm done with my education. I have a bachelor's degree from Purdue. I got through IB in my 11th and 12th. I have no reason to feel bad now. And I'm pretty good at my job too. So I'm fine. I just want to know what this is. So he did the whole thing, and I got diagnosed with dysgraphia. I went almost for 1.5 years, I think, Monday to Friday to see her for an hour. I went for my MBA. After the first class, I remember calling her in tears because I was like, I have never been able to
Experience
take
this
notes.
ease.
Like, what is this? Why did I not find this earlier? And she started laughing. And the other thing that I had not mentioned to you is I would also not know that I was doing badly in class, right? So when I'd write the exam, I would think I was going to get 100, but I would come back with 40. That was the gap between what I thought I was doing and what I was doing. And I think if there is anything I'd like to say about that, it is if your child is struggling, please get them help, right? And often dysgraphia, dyslexia will move a few notches down if you get the right help at the right age. And I think that it's very sad when I hear parents saying, no, there's nothing wrong with my kid. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your kid, but you may still need help, and that's okay. I was telling my mom once that, if I had this at that time, I think I would have done great things. And she told me, you probably would have, but I also think you may not have had as much fun. I remember telling Sudha, that was my teacher, that this should be life skills that are taught in school. Like the way that she used to teach me mind mapping. There's so much to gain from these kind of things.
You have probably mastered the art of not taking it personally.
Yeah, I think that is true. I've talked about my mom a lot, but I think that's come from my dad. Like, I called him from boarding school once and I said, I want to quit. He said, okay. And I didn't call my mom because I knew the reactions would be different. And he said, why do you want to quit? I said, I don't like it here. And I was being picked on and stuff. So I was not happy.
You had your share of
Yeah, fully. So I told him that I want to come back. And he said, okay, I'm going to tell you two things now. One, whoever it is that you're running from has won if you come back. Two, if you still decide on Monday morning that you want to come back, I will bring you home. And I knew he wasn't bluffing. If I had called him on Monday and said, I'm ready to come home, I would have been brought back. No questions asked, no shaming, nothing. He would have just picked me up and said, that's it, that's done. I was also the third kid. My parents were a lot older when I was born. So I always say that I got the best. I never remember him ever questioning my ability to do anything, whether it was work, life. I know if I tell him something, that's the end of that conversation. And I think my mother's ability to believe in me. You are bright, you are capable, you will do the right thing, all came from there. So I think that balance kind of made sure that I didn't crumble under pressure. I think the only time it probably got challenged was in boarding school, where I became an introvert for a little bit. And funny, I think you like this story. A tarot card reader told my mother that this was going to happen, that I was going to become an introvert for some time. And she said, have you not met my daughter? She's anything but an introvert. And she said, no, but she's going to become an introvert. But she'll pass through it on her own. Don't put pressure on her. Don't ask her too many questions. Just leave her be. Okay, so tell us now, if we had to wind down, what would be 3 words you would take away from our conversation?
I would say inspiring, compassionate, and guidance. What would be your 3 words?
I would say main character energy. And I like that it's not boss lady or boss man. I would also say inspiring and finding your tribe.
Somewhere that you can have a conversation with someone.
Yeah. If any of the stuff we've said has resonated with you or it sparked something, try and carry it with you for the day. And who knows, maybe you will be here next discussing it with a friend.